I don't lose cases built on dead bodies. That was the first thing my mentor told me when I took my oath. If someone died because a corporation decided quarterly returns mattered more than oxygen, you don't blink. You don't negotiate with sympathy. You don't romanticize complexity. You make 12 strangers see what happened. June 14th, Federal District Court, Courtroom 7B. 3 trial participants were dead. Internal trial data showed elevated organ failure. The company released the drug anyway. I stood when the clerk called the room to order. My opening binder was tabbed, color-coded, indexed. The parents of one of the victims sat in the second row. I had met them once. I promised nothing. I don't promise outcomes. I promise effort. When I turned toward the defense table, I saw him. He didn't flinch. That was always his strength. 10 years ago, he used to solve calculus proofs without writing steps. Now he wore a navy suit that fit like it had been negotiated into existence. His nameplate read the same as it had in high school yearbooks, but the posture was different. Controlled, polished. Defense counsel for Helixion Biotech. I didn't pause long enough for the jury to notice. I've trained for worse. Members of the jury, I began. This case is about decisions made in conference rooms that cost human lives. He watched me like he was timing my breathing. I moved through the timeline cleanly, trial phase, adverse events, suppressed reports. No adjectives, just facts, dates, email excerpts. I projected a chart showing liver enzyme spikes. The red bars climbed. A juror in the front row swallowed hard. He stood for his response with the same measured calm he used to have when teachers accused him of talking in class. Tragedy does not equal crime, he said. Innovation carries risk. The government will ask you to punish uncertainty. His voice hadn't changed. Still low, still steady. It landed in the room and stayed there. He didn't look at me when he dismantled my phrasing. He reframed the deaths as statistical anomalies, called the trial data incomplete, suggested regulatory ambiguity. I objected once. He anticipated it. The judge sustained him. The first crack in the morning. When we approached the bench for a procedural clarification, he finally leaned close enough that I could hear him without the microphone catching it. You always did over-prepare. No smile. I didn't answer. The judge cleared her throat. We stepped back. I finished my presentation without deviation. When I returned to counsel table, my supervisor slid a note toward me. Win, no delays. As if I needed reminding. Court recessed for lunch. The hallway outside 7B filled with reporters. Cameras angled for statements. I ignored them. My focus stayed on the stack of disclosures Helixion had turned over the previous week. Thousands of pages, buried metadata. I felt him before I saw him again. 5 minutes, he said quietly, nodding toward an empty consultation room down the corridor. I should have refused. Instead, I followed. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and industrial cleaner. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. He closed the door but didn't lock it. This is bigger than you think, he said. It's exactly what I think, I replied. 3 deaths, internal suppression. He tilted his head. You're missing context. Then file it. He studied me for a moment, not as opposing counsel, as if measuring the distance between who I am and who I was. They'll bury you if you push this the way you're planning to. That's not your concern. A beat of silence. He stepped closer, not enough to touch, just enough to disrupt the air between us. You think Helixion stands alone. I held his gaze. If you're implying regulatory complicity, submit evidence. You know it doesn't work like that. There it was, not nostalgia, not flirtation, a fracture. You're defending a CEO who signed off after internal fatalities, I said. Don't dress it up. And you're protecting a department that made its own compromises. The words landed sharper than I expected. That's speculation. Is it? For a second, the room felt smaller. A knock on the door interrupted us. A junior associate poked his head in. We're ready to reconvene. He stepped back immediately, distance restored. Be careful, he said, voice level again. I am. He opened the door for me. Back in the courtroom, the CEO took the stand for preliminary questioning. Tailored suit, public grief face. He spoke about unforeseen complications and commitment to safety. He didn't once say the word dead. I watched the jury's posture shift. Not sympathy, confusion. Hellickshin's internal emails were scheduled for tomorrow's session. The timestamp logs were clean in the official disclosure packet. Too clean. During a brief recess, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I stepped into the hallway and answered. No voice, just breathing. Then the line went dead. When I returned to counsel table, I opened my digital case file to double-check a document I had reviewed the night before. An early-phase safety summary flagged in my notes. The file wasn't there. I searched the directory twice, checked the cloud sync, refreshed the database. Nothing. I looked up slowly. He was already watching me. Not smirking, not triumphant, just aware. The judge called the room back to order. I closed my laptop. Your Honor, I said, rising again. The prosecution requests a brief continuance to address an evidentiary discrepancy. He didn't object. That worried me more than if he had. As the jury filed out, he gathered his folders with deliberate precision. When he passed my table, he didn't stop. Check your timestamps, he murmured. Then he walked out of the courtroom like nothing had shifted. But something had. Because the missing document wasn't just evidence. It was the first proof that someone inside this case had access to my system. And I didn't yet know if the person across the aisle was protecting his client. Or protecting something far larger than either of us. The file didn't vanish by accident. I knew that before I reached my office. The elevator ride-up felt longer than it was. Someone's cologne lingered in the metal box. My reflection in the doors looked composed. Jaw set, shoulders straight, the version of me juries trust. Inside my office, I locked the door and pulled the blinds halfway down. My laptop connected to the secure server automatically. I ran the audit trail. Every document opened leaves a fingerprint, time, device, credentials. The safety summary had been accessed at 2:17 a.m. From my credentials. I was asleep at 2:17 a.m. I scrolled further. The access point wasn't my office terminal. It pinged from an external IP routed through a courthouse subnet. Someone used my clearance inside the building. I leaned back slowly. He told me to check timestamps. That wasn't a warning. It was an acknowledgement. A soft knock hit my door. Come in, I said, voice steady. My supervisor stepped inside without waiting for the invitation to finish forming. He closed the door behind him. I'm hearing we requested a continuance mid-session. There's an evidentiary issue. With digital integrity. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not surprise, calculation. We can't afford procedural stumbles, he said. This case is under a microscope. Someone accessed a restricted file under my credentials. Are you certain? Yes. A pause. He walked toward my desk, glanced at the screen without asking. Then we handle it internally, he said, quietly. That document established knowledge prior to public disclosure. He didn't look at me when he answered. You don't need that one to win. That was the first time I felt it. Not doubt. Containment. He left without asking to see the full audit trail. I reopened the server log and copied the metadata to an encrypted drive. If the system was compromised, I wasn't leaving it there. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. This time, there was no breathing. Just a voice, distorted. Drop the timestamp. The line went dead. No threat, no explanation, just instruction. I saved the call log. Court resumed the next morning without the missing exhibit. I adjusted strategy on the fly, reframed the argument around adverse event clustering, shifted emphasis toward internal risk assessment language. He adapted just as quickly. When I questioned Hellickshan's clinical director, I pressed on internal escalation protocols. Was there ever a meeting to discuss halting distribution? I asked. The director hesitated. He stood. Objection, calls for privileged deliberation. Sustained. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. The jury saw the hesitation, but hesitation isn't proof. During recess, I found him alone near the stairwell instead of the hallway crowd. You knew, I said. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. You're not the only one who can read server logs. Did you access my file? No. You're the only one who hinted. I told you to check timestamps. That's not denial. He exhaled once through his nose. You're walking into something that won't stop at losing a case. Then explain it. I can't. Or you won't. He stepped closer this time, close enough that I could see the faint scar near his collarbone I didn't recognize, close enough to notice he hadn't slept much. You think this is about one CEO signing one approval, he said quietly. You think your department doesn't have exposure. My department prosecutes. Your department negotiates. The stairwell door slammed somewhere above us. The echo ran down the concrete shaft. If you're implying misconduct, file a motion, I said. And if I'm trying to keep you from being collateral, I don't need protection. That's not what I said. For a moment, neither of us moved. The distance between principal and survival felt thinner than it should. A bailiff called us back inside. That afternoon, a new development hit the docket. The defense submitted a supplemental disclosure, internal compliance, reviews suggesting the fatalities were linked to undisclosed pre-existing conditions in the participants. I hadn't seen those documents before. They were dated 2 weeks ago. My stomach didn't tighten. It recalibrated. When I requested immediate access to the full dataset, he agreed without argument. Too easily. I spent the evening in my office reviewing the new submission. The formatting was inconsistent. Metadata fields partially scrubbed. One PDF showed signs of being rebuilt. Manufactured reinforcement. At 9:48 p.m., the building lights shifted to night mode. Motion sensors dimmed the hallway outside my office. My screen flickered. A new file appeared in the shared evidence folder. Untitled. No sender. I opened it. A short internal email chain. Subject line, phase adjustment. The CEO's name appeared midway down the thread. Regulators will align if we frame mortality as statistically non-significant. There it was. Knowledge. Language stripped of remorse. I checked the header. The file was routed through an anonymized relay. I didn't forward it. I didn't print it. I copied it to the encrypted drive. My office door handle rattled once. Not a knock. A test. I closed the laptop halfway and stood. Who's there? No answer. I walked to the door and opened it quickly. Empty hallway, lights dim, cleaning cart parked near the elevators. I stepped out, scanned both directions. Nothing. When I returned inside, my phone was no longer where I left it on the desk. It sat closer to the edge. Face down. I hadn't left it like that. The screen lit up before I touched it. Unknown number again. A message this time. You're not supposed to see that. I didn't respond. Instead, I typed one message to him. Did you send it? The reply came within seconds. No. Then another. Stop digging tonight. I stared at the screen. That wasn't an order. It was fear. I closed the blinds fully and powered down the office lights. The email on the encrypted drive wasn't just leverage. It was evidence of intent at the highest level. If authentic. If admissible. If I survived long enough to use it. I gathered my files and headed toward the parking structure beneath the courthouse. Concrete pillars, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead, footsteps echoing too loudly in open space. Halfway to my car, I sensed movement behind me. I didn't turn immediately. I listened. Another set of footsteps adjusted pace to match mine. I reached into my bag, not for a weapon, but for the encrypted drive. If something happened, that was the target. The footsteps closed in. Wait. His voice. I turned. He stood under the harsh light, tie loosened, expression tighter than I'd ever seen it. You have something you shouldn't, he said. That depends. They're monitoring internal transfers. Who is they? He didn't answer that. Instead, he looked past me into the shadows between the cars. Get in your vehicle, he said quietly. Lock the doors. Why? Because this stopped being about litigation. I held his gaze. If you're protecting your client, say it. I'm protecting you. That word hung between us, like it didn't belong to either side. From somewhere deeper in the garage, a car engine started. Headlights flicked on. Not near us. Watching. He stepped back. Drive, he said. I didn't move. Because if I drove away, I'd be reacting. And I don't react. The engine idled in the dark. And for the first time since this trial began, I realized the threat wasn't confined to the courtroom. It was mobile. And it was already here. I didn't drive. The engine across the garage idled like a held breath. Headlights stayed fixed, low beams cutting a pale tunnel through concrete dust. He stepped closer to my car door, but didn't touch it. If you walk back into that building with what you copied, he said quietly, you won't control what happens next. I don't control it now. That's not the same thing. The vehicle in the shadows shifted slightly, tires scraping against grit. Not approaching, adjusting. I opened my door and slid into the driver's seat without breaking eye contact with him. Locked the doors. The click sounded louder than it should have. He moved toward the passenger side. I hesitated. Then I unlocked it. He got in. We didn't look at each other immediately. The headlights across the structure went dark. The engine cut. Silence rolled in heavy. License plate, I asked. Covered. Make. Doesn't matter. Everything mattered. He leaned back, scanning the mirrors. They're gauging reaction. From who? From you. That answer narrowed things in a way I didn't like. I pulled out slowly, tires crunching over painted lines. No sudden acceleration, no signal of fear. The ramp spiraled upward. My pulse didn't spike, it sharpened. Clean, efficient. At street level, the night air felt colder than the garage. I turned right instead of left. Where are you going? He asked. Not home. He didn't argue. We drove without music. City lights slid across the windshield in streaks. A black SUV merged two cars behind us at the next intersection. I watched it through the rearview mirror. It didn't overtake. It didn't fall back. You're being followed, I said. I assumed that when I left the courthouse. You led them to me. No, he replied. You led them to yourself when you opened that file. The SUV stayed steady through 3 turns. I pulled into a hospital parking lot and looped back out without stopping. The SUV kept going. Not them, he said. Or they're better than that. We drove another 10 minutes before I turned onto a quiet industrial strip near the river. Most buildings were dark. One bar at the end of the block glowed dim red through fogged glass. I parked in front. You're joking, he said. I need somewhere loud enough to talk. Inside, the place smelled like citrus cleaner and stale whiskey. A jukebox hummed low near the back wall. Only 2 patrons sat at the counter, hunched over drinks. We took a booth in the corner. I placed my bag on the table between us. You said they're monitoring transfers, I began. They flagged unusual routing tonight. So you have visibility into internal alerts now. I have visibility into survival. I studied his face under the weak light. There were new lines at the edges of his eyes, not from age, from tension. Did you know about the email? I asked. No. You knew something. I knew the case was layered. That's vague. It's precise. The bartender approached. I ordered water. He ordered nothing. When we were alone again, I unzipped my bag and removed the encrypted drive. I didn't slide it toward him. I just let it sit there. If this is authentic, I said, it establishes executive awareness before public risk acknowledgement. And if it's bait, then someone wants me to misstep. He leaned forward, forearms on the table. Listen carefully, he said. If that document didn't come through formal discovery, introducing it improperly hands them grounds for mistrial. I know procedure. I'm not questioning that. Then what are you questioning? Your timing. I watched the bartender wipe down the counter for the 3rd time. Do you believe the CEO signed off knowing people would die? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Yes. The word didn't shock me. It settled something. Then why defend him? Because the law isn't morality. That's convenient. It's structural. Silence expanded between us. You warned me, I said finally, in the stairwell. I warned you because this extends beyond Heliction. To my department. He didn't confirm. He didn't need to. If regulators aligned, I said slowly. Then prosecutions were curated. That's one interpretation. And the other, that this was managed. The jukebox switched songs. The bass vibrated faintly through the booth. You're asking me to slow down, I said. I'm asking you not to get erased. Erased how? He held my gaze. Career, credibility, or worse. The bartender glanced at us again. I slipped the drive back into my bag. If I sit on it, I'm complicit. If you rush it, you're finished. I stood before the conversation could calcify. Outside, the air carried the scent of river water and metal. He followed me to the sidewalk. Where are you going now? He asked. To verify authenticity. That requires access. I have it. He stepped closer. If you trigger another flag tonight, they'll escalate. I don't answer to fear. No, he said quietly. You answer to principle. Headlights turned onto the street at the far end of the block. Not fast, not slow. Intentional. He noticed them too. You need to decide, he said. Are you building a case against one man? Or against a system? The headlights slowed. I met his eyes. You said you were protecting me. I am. Then don't stand in my way. The car at the end of the street stopped without parking. Engine running. Watching. He reached for my arm, not forceful, firm. If you expose everything, he said, you won't get to choose what survives. I pulled free. That's already true. I walked to my car and got in without looking back. As I pulled away, I checked the mirror. The vehicle at the end of the street fell in behind me this time. And he didn't follow. The car stayed 3 lengths behind me. Not aggressive, not hiding. Just present. I took 2 unnecessary turns through residential streets lined with dark houses and trimmed hedges. Porch lights glowed warm against quiet lawns. The vehicle mirrored each movement without hesitation. I didn't speed up. Instead, I slowed. The gap tightened slightly. At the next intersection, I ran a yellow light late enough to test reflexes. In the mirror, headlights surged through red. That told me enough. I drove straight to the federal building annex instead of my apartment. The overnight security entrance sat recessed beneath concrete overhangs. Cameras fixed at both angles. As I pulled into the secured lot, the gate arm lowered behind me. The trailing car kept going. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished tile and recycled air. The night guard looked up from his monitor. Burning the midnight oil, he asked. Something like that. I signed in and headed upstairs without waiting for the elevator. Stairwell lights flickered on with each step. My office door was exactly as I'd left it. Blinds closed, desk cleared. I didn't turn on the overhead lights, just the desk lamp. I plugged the encrypted drive into an isolated laptop not connected to the main network. Air-gapped, manual transfer only. The email opened the same way it had earlier. Same phrasing, same signature block. But this time, I examined the header line by line. Routing path. Server stamps. Embedded ID markers. One field didn't align with Helixion's corporate server structure. The originating server ID matched a subcontracted data management firm used by multiple regulatory agencies. Not just the company. Government interface. I leaned back slowly. The knock came at 11:32 p.m. Not a rattle this time, knuckles measured. I closed the laptop lid, but didn't remove the drive. Who is it? Building security. I didn't move toward the door immediately. Instead, I checked the hallway camera feed from my monitor. A uniformed guard stood outside. Not the one downstairs. Different badge. I opened the door halfway. Yes. Routine check. We had a report of unusual access activity in this wing. At this hour. He offered a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Protocol. My clearance covers late access. Of course, just need to verify you're alone. I am. His gaze flicked past me into the office. For everyone's safety, he added. A faint smell of cologne lingered, sharp, synthetic. I held the door frame. You can confirm with the desk downstairs, I said. He studied me for a second longer than necessary. Then nodded. Have a good evening. He walked down the hallway without looking back. I closed the door and locked it. When I reopened the laptop, the file glitched for a split second before stabilizing. Someone was testing response time. I unplugged the drive and placed it inside the inner pocket of my blazer. My phone buzzed. Not an unknown number. Him. They're moving faster now. I stared at the message. Before I could reply, another notification appeared. Internal memo. Emergency departmental meeting, 7:00 a.m. Mandatory attendance. Subject line. Ethics review. The plea draft hit my inbox at 6:12 a.m. Subject line. Proposed resolution. No warning. I opened it standing up. The structure was clean, strategic, contained. Heliction would admit to regulatory miscommunication. A mid-level research director would accept criminal negligence. The CEO would step down voluntarily. Fines, compliance reform, no admission of intentional suppression. 3 deaths reduced to procedural oversight. My jaw tightened once, then steadied. The filing timestamp showed it was queued for submission within hours. He hadn't mentioned this. I forwarded nothing, printed nothing. I saved the draft to a private folder and walked into the emergency departmental meeting already in session. The conference room buzzed with low conversation. Screens displayed media coverage from the night before, speculation about internal evidence disputes. My supervisor stood at the head of the table. We're being pressured to consider resolution pathways, he said. The optics of dragging this through extended litigation could backfire. Backfire for who? I asked. His gaze flicked toward me, then away. For public trust. There it was again. Containment language. The defense submitted a plea framework this morning, I said evenly. It shifts liability. We've reviewed it. And it may be pragmatic. Pragmatic. I didn't argue in the room, not yet. When the meeting adjourned, I walked past reporters gathered near the courthouse entrance and headed straight for the parking structure below. He was already there. Leaning against his car, jacket off, sleeves rolled once. You move fast, I said. He didn't pretend ignorance. It's a reasonable outcome. For who? For everyone. I stepped closer. You're offering up a scientist to shield a signature. He authorized within counsel. He authorized distribution. His jaw flexed. This ends without tearing down infrastructure, he said. That matters. To you. To stability. Stability isn't justice. Neither is spectacle. The word landed sharper than he intended. You think I'm chasing spectacle? I asked. I think you're underestimating collateral. And you're calculating sacrifice. A car alarm went off 2 rows over, abrupt and shrill. Neither of us flinched. The research director signed safety acknowledgments, he said. That's exposure. Under executive pressure. You can't prove coercion. I can prove awareness. He held my gaze, longer than usual. Take the deal, he said quietly. You secure accountability without destabilizing oversight structures. You mean without exposing regulatory alignment? His silence answered. I stepped back. If I accept this, I said, I become complicit in misdirection. If you reject it, they'll move around you. They already are. He looked toward the exit ramp. You think your office won't distance itself if you push too hard. My office doesn't scare me. That's not what I asked. My phone vibrated. Internal affairs. Requesting formal review of case handling procedures. I didn't show him the screen. They're circling, he said. They can circle. Don't mistake pride for leverage. I moved past him toward my car. You drafted this knowing what it protects, I said without turning back. I drafted it knowing what it prevents. I stopped. And what's that? Collapse. I didn't answer. Because collapse wasn't always the worst outcome. As I drove out of the structure, I knew one thing clearly. He wasn't just defending a client anymore. He was defending architecture. And I was about to decide whether to bring weight down on it. The memo he showed me wasn't digital. It was printed, folded once, left on the passenger seat of my car. No note, no explanation. Just the document. I hadn't seen him approach the vehicle that morning. The courthouse lot had been crowded with press vans and protest signs. The memo header bore my department's insignia. Subject, External Complaint Review. Dated 3 years prior. The body outlined a whistleblower submission alleging irregular data coordination between regulatory consultants and Heliction's compliance team. The final paragraph recommended administrative deferral pending interagency discussion. No prosecution followed. The signature at the bottom belonged to my supervisor. I read it twice. Then once more. Inside the courthouse, the air felt heavier than usual. Protesters' voices filtered faintly through the windows upstairs. When I entered my supervisor's office without knocking, he looked up slowly. Close the door, he said. I placed the memo on his desk. He didn't touch it. Where did you get that? He asked. Does it matter? It does. You reviewed an external complaint and deferred action. It was evaluated. And shelved. It was jurisdictionally complex. It implicated regulatory coordination. He leaned back. You're stepping into policy terrain. I'm standing in evidence. That complaint lacked substantiation. It lacked pursuit. A long silence followed. You think prosecutions exist in a vacuum? He asked. There are broader considerations, such as economic stability, public confidence, international impact, and fatalities. They were not established at that time. The distinction felt engineered. Why wasn't it reopened later? I asked. Because escalation would have triggered federal review chains beyond our control. So you avoided it. We managed it. The word landed exactly as he intended. I picked up the memo. If this surfaces publicly, I said, it reframes the entire case. It would destroy institutional credibility. Or cleanse it. He studied me carefully. You're ambitious, he said. Don't confuse ambition with martyrdom. This isn't about ambition. It never is. I left without responding. In the hallway, reporters were louder than usual. Word of the proposed plea had leaked. Headlines scrolled across phones in real time. Corporate reform possible. Case nearing resolution. Narrative shifting. I walked into the courtroom that afternoon with the memos, weight pressing against my ribs inside my blazer. He avoided my eyes until recess. In the corridor, I held the folded paper up between us. You're expanding the battlefield, I said. You asked for context. You gave me ammunition against my own side. I gave you truth. Truth that implicates oversight. Truth that shows you're not alone in compromise. I didn't compromise. He looked at me steadily. Not yet. The sound of chanting grew louder outside. Why now? I asked. Why give me this now? Because if you're going to dismantle something, he said quietly, you should know how deep it runs. And you. I operate within it. You protect it. I prevent chaos. And if chaos is necessary. He didn't answer immediately. That's not your decision to make alone, he said. I watched him carefully. You're afraid, I said. Of recklessness. Or exposure. His gaze hardened. If this memo enters the record improperly, they'll bury you first. They already tried. Not like this. Across the hallway, cameras turned toward us. Someone had recognized proximity. I lowered the memo. We're both holding detonators now, I said. Yes. And you think I won't pull mine? I think you will, he replied. Then why hand it to me? His voice dropped. Because I'd rather you hold it than someone who doesn't hesitate. The chant outside shifted into a unified rhythm. Inside, the system recalibrated. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. If I exposed Heliction, I would fracture my own foundation. If I exposed my foundation, I would fracture everything. He wasn't asking me to stop. He was asking me to choose which collapse I could live with. The courtroom felt smaller. The morning deliberations began. Not physically, psychologically. Every seat filled, reporters lining the walls, camera crews banned from inside but waiting outside like predators for reaction shots. The air carried heat from too many bodies and not enough ventilation. The jury filed in without meeting anyone's eyes. He sat across from me, composed in a way that almost looked rehearsed. The CEO beside him wore humility like a tailored accessory, head slightly bowed, hands folded, a portrait of corporate restraint. Deliberations began. Waiting is a different kind of violence. No arguments to deliver, no objections to raise, just the steady erosion of certainty while 12 people weigh narratives in a sealed room. Outside, chants rose and fell in waves, names of the dead carried through glass and concrete. Inside, my supervisor paced behind counsel tables like a caged animal pretending not to be one. Mid-afternoon, a court clerk approached the bench. A note from the jury. My pulse didn't jump, it narrowed. The judge read silently, then cleared her throat. Jurors request clarification on the definition of intent as it relates to executive liability. Intent. Not negligence, not compliance. Intent. I felt his eyes on me for the first time that day. The judge reissued instructions, language precise, legal thresholds reinforced. When the jury returned to deliberation, the temperature in the room shifted again. Subtle, but perceptible. An hour later, another disruption. One juror requested medical attention. Heat exhaustion, we were told. They were escorted out briefly, then returned. Fatigue fractures judgment. By evening, the foreperson stood. The words arrived methodically. On the most serious charge, not guilty. A sound escaped somewhere in the gallery, half gasp, half disbelief. The CEO lowered his head, as if burdened by the weight of relief. His attorneys surrounded him with controlled celebration. I didn't look at him. I looked at the families seated behind me. No screaming, no collapse. Just stillness. The remaining charges carried minor penalties. Fines, compliance oversight, nothing proportional to what I had seen in internal documents. Outside the courthouse, flashbulbs exploded the moment we stepped into view. He gave a statement about due process, about the integrity of the legal system, about truth prevailing through structure. The CEO echoed language about commitment to innovation and safety. When microphones pushed toward me, I kept my statement brief. "We respect the jury's decision," I said. "Our review continues." That was enough to spark headlines. "Our review continues." It sounded like defiance. Back inside, as security ushered most of the crowd out, I felt my phone vibrate. A message from an unknown encrypted contact. "Check the feeds." I stepped into an empty witness room and opened a news site. A document leak had hit social media. Internal correspondence suggesting inappropriate communication between prosecution and defense. Selective screenshots, cropped timestamps. Messages between him and me. Out of context. Personal tone implied. The headline forming in real time. Conflict of interest. My breath didn't catch. It recalibrated. He found me seconds later. "You didn't leak that," he said. No. Neither did I. The implication hung between us. Someone had access to both sides. "They're redirecting outrage," I said. "From acquittal to impropriety." "You're the easier villain," I added. He didn't argue. "Did you know about this?" I asked. No. "For once," I said quietly, "I believe you." That landed harder than accusation. Across the hallway, internal affairs officers entered the building. Not subtle. Not discreet. The system wasn't correcting itself. It was insulating itself. And now we were liabilities. He reached for my arm, not publicly, subtly. "This is where they isolate you," he said. "They already did." "No, this is different." Footsteps approached. An officer stopped in front of me. "Counselor," she said, "we need to speak with you regarding procedural disclosures." Behind her, cameras pressed against glass doors. The chant outside shifted tone. Not just anger. Division. Some shouting my name in support. Others calling for accountability. Polarization spreads faster than truth. As I followed the officer down the corridor, I understood something with absolute clarity. The verdict hadn't ended anything. It had triggered a containment strategy. And the next move wouldn't happen in open court. They didn't bring me to an interrogation room. They brought me to a conference room. Polite lighting, bottled water, neutral walls. 2 investigators. 1 recording device placed openly on the table. Standard inquiry, the senior officer said. No one believes that phrase. They asked about communication boundaries, about contact frequency, about decision-making independence. I answered precisely. No embellishment, no defensiveness. When they referenced the leaked screenshots, I requested full context files. We're reviewing source integrity, they replied. Of course they were. Across the hall, I knew he was answering similar questions. Not together. Separate containment. Halfway through the session, my phone, temporarily returned for verification, buzzed with breaking news alerts. A larger document dump had surfaced online. This one wasn't selective. It included internal Helixion emails. It included regulatory correspondence. It included departmental memos. Not just fragments. Full chains. Public servers were already mirroring the files. The investigators paused mid-question. One of them stepped out to confirm. The senior officer's composure thinned. You're aware of this? He asked. I am now. The leak reframed everything. It exposed executive awareness prior to public disclosure. It revealed regulatory coordination language. It displayed internal departmental hesitation over prosecution optics. Not rumors. Evidence. My supervisor's name appeared in multiple threads. So did the CEO's. So did dates aligning with suppressed warnings. When I was released from the room, the building had shifted from controlled inquiry to controlled panic. Phones rang nonstop, doors closed quickly, conversations hushed when I approached. He stood at the end of the corridor, jacket back on, expression unreadable. You, I asked. No. I didn't. I know. For a moment, the noise around us faded. This is too comprehensive, he said. Someone with clearance. Or someone above it. The CEO had already issued a statement condemning data theft and manipulation. Predictable. But the documents were verifiable, metadata intact, routing consistent. This wasn't sabotage. It was exposure. Reporters now framed the narrative differently. Corporate corruption, regulatory complicity, prosecutorial restraint questioned. Public anger shifted target. Not just one man. An ecosystem. My phone lit up again. Suspension, notice pending review. Effective immediately. I exhaled once. You're suspended, he asked. Temporarily. Same. There it was. Balance. Not relief. Just symmetry. He looked at me for a long second. I need to tell you something, he said. I waited. I knew about the fatalities earlier than I testified. The words didn't detonate. They settled. How much earlier? I asked. Enough. And you proceeded anyway. Yes. For strategy. For structure. For yourself. He didn't answer that. I studied him differently now. Not as opponent. Not as ally. As someone who chose awareness and continued forward. You defended it knowing, I said. I defended the system that prevents collapse. And if the system causes the harm. He didn't respond. Outside, Sirens wailed somewhere downtown. Protesters had shifted from chanting to confrontation. The building lights flickered as generators engaged backup power. Someone above us had decided transparency was less dangerous than controlled decay. The leak wasn't random. It was surgical. And neither of us had been the surgeon. He stepped closer. "They'll need scapegoats," he said quietly. "Convenient ones. We fit." "Yes." I looked down the corridor, where investigators moved quickly between offices. "You chose to know and continue," I said. "And you chose to suspect and continue." That one landed. Because it was true. I had seen enough signs to question earlier. I stayed in motion. The difference between us wasn't morality. It was threshold. A news alert flashed across my screen. Federal Review Panel convened. That meant testimony. Under oath. Public. I met his eyes one more time. "This doesn't end with suspension," I said. "No," he agreed. "It ends with someone burning." The question wasn't whether. It was who. The fluorescent lights hummed louder than usual. Every tap of a keyboard, every shuffled file, felt amplified. I sat across from the lead investigator, hands folded, waiting. The memo from Chapter 6 sat under the recorder between us, its presence heavier than the walls. "You've been implicated in procedural irregularities," she said. "We need a full account of communications, document access, and decisions affecting the Helliction case." I nodded, truth, but only what I could survive disclosing. Minutes stretched, questions sharpened. Each one probed memory, intent, ethics. The line between confession and accusation blurred. Halfway through, my phone vibrated. A single line, "He's here." Across the building, in another conference room, he was undergoing the same scrutiny. Same investigators, same recordings. Separate containment, identical pressure. I looked down at the recorder. I could hear my own breathing amplified in the silence. They asked me about the leaked documents, the internal memo, the plea draft, the CEO's communications. Every response had to be precise. Because one misstep meant immunity lost. One misstep meant career, credibility, and perhaps freedom. After 3 hours, the officer paused. "You understand that cooperation may reduce your exposure," she said. I leaned back, "And cooperation may also implicate others." She didn't answer. I spent the next 20 minutes recounting every email I had read, every file I had opened, every move I had made to secure evidence. No embellishment, no judgment, only traceable facts. Then the subtle twist arrived. A junior analyst handed me a folder I hadn't requested. Inside, internal communications I had never seen. The metadata suggested someone had been feeding investigators material that could implicate either of us, manipulated to create maximum pressure. I realized it wasn't random. It was strategic. Somewhere above them, someone was orchestrating leverage on both sides, testing thresholds, forcing decisions. By the time my session ended, I felt stripped, but also liberated. I exited into the hallway. The city lights had grown colder, harder, sharper against glass facades. My phone buzzed again, his message. "Meet rooftop, alone, now." I didn't hesitate. The roof was quiet, cold concrete beneath my boots. The city stretched in jagged lines below. He leaned against the railing, arms crossed, eyes tracing the horizon. "You survived," he said. "I followed procedure," I said. No, he corrected. You survived yourself. I studied him. His face was taut, yet there was something unguarded in the shadows cast by the floodlights. I have documents, I said. Files that can destroy oversight and corporation alike. He nodded. I have the same. We didn't argue. Not yet. I know why you continued after knowing, I said. And you. I suspected, and I acted anyway. The wind picked up. It lifted strands of hair, rattled his jacket. You're thinking about loyalty, I said, not justice. He laughed softly. Justice is subjective. We survived because we measured it. And the people who died, I asked. His silence answered. We held our confession across the distance of experience, not words. The city beneath us reflected neon fragments of our moral compromise. You can't control what happens next, I said. No, he admitted, but I can choose what I face. We reached the edge of understanding. You'll testify tomorrow, I said. I will. And you. I will, but not everything. The phrase hung, partial truth, strategic omission. A helicopter passed overhead, lights cutting sharp lines across concrete and glass. Somewhere below, investigators waited. Above, sky stretched, unbroken. We stepped back from the railing. Separate directions, separate paths, same tension between survival and revelation. And in the silent moment, one lingering question. Could either of us ever return to a world where trust didn't carry a death sentence? Morning came with a gray chill. The courthouse steps gleamed wet from overnight drizzle. Crowds had assembled, half protesting, half observing. Cameras poised like vultures. I adjusted my coat and walked in without looking at him. Not yet. Inside, the formal hearing began. Everyone assumed procedure would decide everything. But procedure was already compromised. Evidence had leaked, testimony had been tainted, strategy had shifted through invisible hands. He sat across the room, eyes briefed toward me in silent acknowledgement. Not warmth, not warning, recognition. We gave statements, full accounts, adhered to law, avoided exaggeration, protected partial truths. The room was filled with tension, so thick it pressed against clothing and skin. Each word chosen with surgical precision. Outside, protests shifted. The chant was now fractured. Social media erupted. Headlines formed and reformed with each moment, executive impunity, prosecutorial complicity. The CEO's statement arrived mid-testimony, expressionless, calm, words crafted to reclaim narrative. I realized in that moment, justice in this case wouldn't arrive in a single verdict. It had already fractured into multiple outcomes. Corporate, legal, ethical, all divergent. We concluded testimony without incident. Judges adjourned. Cameras shuttered. He approached once more, not speaking. No folder, no gesture, just presence. You know what you hold, I said. And you. We both know the limits. The sun broke briefly through clouds, casting one narrow beam across the marble floor. Our reflections elongated and fractured, mingling with shadows. You could have exposed everything, I said. And destroyed the system entirely, he countered. I looked past him toward the courthouse doors, crowds filtering out, reporters leaning forward, every eye waiting for resolution. You think we'll ever repair trust? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Not here, he said. We turned in opposite directions. Separate hearings awaited, separate obligations. Same unspoken understanding. Survival required compromise. And desire, unacknowledged but persistent, remained a variable neither of us could fully measure. As I walked down the corridor, a phone buzzed with a new alert. Another internal leak detected. And somewhere, above, someone was still orchestrating the chessboard. The unanswered question lingered. Who would fall first when the next piece moved? We exited into sunlight that reflected off glass facades like fractured mirrors, carrying the memory of what we had survived and what we had preserved. The system endured. Truth remained partial. And desire, still unresolved. The chapter closed, but not the story.